Welcome to The Rest is Politics US. I'm Katty Kay.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci. Tell us what's going on in Minnesota.
Just to fill you in, if you're not up to date on it, US Border Patrol agents over the weekend fatally shot Alex Pretti. He is a 37-year-old American citizen who was an ICU nurse. He worked in a Veterans Administration hospital, was thought to be well loved there. There's very touching video of him with some of the veterans that he treated. The instant reaction to this shooting from the administration was interesting. You had Kristi Noem coming out saying that he was a domestic terrorist. Stephen Miller came out and said he was an assassin. They all pointed to the fact that Alex Pretti had a gun with him. And there are various accounts from the administration that have been replayed about what he was doing with that gun. There's lots of video. I've watched it. I'm sure you have, Anthony, multiple times. It's super disturbing. The New York Times, I think, has the best TikTok go through it. You can kind of go through it almost frame by frame to see what is happening and who is giving the correct account, because the White House is saying Alex Pretti had a gun, and the implication is he took this gun to a protest and was going to use it to cause mass casualties. That's what the Department of Homeland Security is saying. Actually, if you look at the video, it's pretty clear he approaches this ICE situation holding up his phone. He doesn't touch his gun. One of the officers in a kind of scuffle situation finds the gun, pulls it away from him, yells gun. And at that point, Alex Pretti is on the ground, subdued. They've been pepper spraying him and a couple of other people who are at the protest. And according to the New York Times, about 10 shots are fired at him. So a lot of conflicting information. The Wall Street Journal this morning, interestingly, is calling for ICE to stop these kind of operations and to be pulled back because this is really getting out of control. So that's just the kind of facts of where we are. My sense, as we are recording this on Monday morning, East Coast time, is that the president has concerns about this. He's put out a post about this saying that he's sending Tom Horman to Minneapolis. You've got quite a lot of people on the MAGA right not happy with this, speaking out about this. You've got gun owners of groups speaking out about this because Alex Pretti was carrying this gun. In Minneapolis has what's called an open carry law. You're allowed to carry a gun, despite what Kash Patel, the FBI director, has said. You're allowed to carry a gun to a protest. There's no law against that, according to Minneapolis police chief. So I think Trump is in a position where, unless he wants this to be the Stephen Miller administration rather than the Donald Trump administration, he is going to have to pull back against these activities. I think this is going to do him and the Republican Party damage. What's your take, Anthony?
First of all, I think it was an excellent summary of everything that's going on, but I want to talk behind the scenes because I think this is important. Their position is Minnesota, blue state, corrupt, illegal aliens stealing Medicare money and other types of governmental program money. We're going to make this a cause celeb, and this is going to ignite the fire of the culture war for us to beat the Democrats in the midterm elections. And so they're in the war room, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Corey Lewandowski, and they're saying to themselves, we're going to have a huge media fete in Minnesota. We're going to go up there. We're going to have our jackboot guys up there. They're masked men. We're going to beat up all the liberals. We're going to expose all the fraud. They're whispering to each other that they're all on Signal, collaborating with the Minnesota elected officials to steal federal money. This is a blue state theft that's going on, and we're going to expose it all.
So the same old culture wars, really.
Yes, this is a culture war battle, okay, that's now led to 2 murders, but it's a culture war battle. So what's happened is that's their MO. I just want to make sure everybody understands what they're doing and what the staging is, okay? And so the result of it was supposed to be, this morning, we're supposed to be talking about how brave the ICE soldiers are and how brave everybody is to uncover this fraud. And the Democrats are horrific and the Republicans are great. We're winning the culture war. Vote Republican in the midterm election. So I just want everybody to understand where these assholes and what the plan was. Okay.
So they go back to the same old playbook, you mean? That was their plan.
Of course, it backfires on them.
Yeah.
To the point where they're shooting somebody that's unarmed.
Awful.
And they can't hide it. Okay. Now, what they can hide for now is they can hide the soldiers. I'm going to call them soldiers because this is a militant operation.
You mean the ICE agents?
The ICE agents. I'm calling them soldiers. That's my editorial discretion here because that's what they're doing.
That's how they're acting.
This is an attack on American citizens. Okay, so repressive regimes have no problem killing their own citizens. Let's just stipulate that. We don't know how many casualties there were in the Iran protests last week. We don't know. Okay, but some are saying tens of thousands. We don't know. Some say that they hired mercenaries from Iraq to come in because the Iranian militia wouldn't shoot at fellow Iranians. But here we are. These guys are untrained. They're on the job, newly minted, and they are making colossal mistakes. Now here is the crack, Katty K. Okay, and so I'm going to push it back to you. Did Donald Trump crack last night to the Wall Street Journal, and has he cracked this morning?
Yeah, I think he's cracking.
Tell us why he's cracking. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, so this is another climb back. And you know me, I hate making predictions. But my understanding is Donald Trump doesn't like the scenes that are coming out of Minneapolis. And particularly, he doesn't like the way that DHS have handled the response to the shooting and the killing of Alex Pretti. He doesn't think that Kristi Noem's done a good job. I think she is, her job tenure has just got a little bit more precarious. And that's why he's sending up Tom Homan to see if the White House can kind of change the subject on this. And you've got a rare instance. It's the kind of thing that you and I are being asked in Davos last week. When does the Republican Party stand up? Well, you have this rare moment where you have some Republicans who have been super loyal to the president, people like James Comer, who's the head of the very powerful Oversight Committee, who gave a powerful warning saying that federal agents should now leave Minneapolis. He's been super close to the administration, hasn't called them out, has done lots of investigations on the administration's behalf. You've got Senator Pete Ricketts from Nebraska, who's called the situation horrifying. You've got Governor Kevin Stitt from Oklahoma, who said that Americans don't like what they're seeing now. And you've also got people from the MAGA right, influencers, actually comparing the killing of Alex Pretti to that of Ashley Babbitt, the woman who was killed on January the 6th, saying that they should both be alive and that this shouldn't be happening. These are people with huge followings in the MAGA community online who are staunch MAGA supporters. And then you've got people in the gun rights community saying, yes, of course, he was allowed to carry a gun. It was not illegal to take that gun, whatever Kash Patel says, to a protest. And yes, he maybe perhaps should have been arrested, but this should not have been a death sentence because Americans have the right to carry guns. So I think this is a moment where Donald Trump is looking at all of these people. He's looking at the 63% of Americans disapprove of ICE, and he's going to climb down on this. I think you're starting, like you say, in that Truth Social post, he said they've done a phenomenal job. So he paints this as a win. ICE has done a phenomenal job. Homeland Security has done a phenomenal job. At some point, we'll leave. It's a bit like the negotiations over Greenland, right? You make this a negotiation, right? You push it into the future. We know that episodes like this aren't easy for you to hear. They're not easy for us to make either. We wish it wasn't the case. But if you do value careful reporting and thoughtful discussion around events like this, please do consider subscribing, liking, and commenting your thoughts below. It really does help us to keep this show up for stories like this one that deserve all of our attention. Thank you. Now back to the video.
He's talking out of both sides of his mouth, right? Because the guy has a license to carry the gun. He's not using the gun. And they're now attacking the Second Amendment. But they've always been for the Second Amendment, but they're situationally now against the Second Amendment. That's the hypocrisy of the whole thing. So Trump's whole MO, I'm never going to apologize. We've murdered 2 people. We're never apologizing. But this has gone very, very badly. And so he's telling Homan now, who's a big rival of Kristi Noem's, and Homan has told everybody who thinks she is incompetent, jailhouse Barbie, is completely incompetent. Okay. He's got his own set of issues, but at least he has some border patrol experience. Okay. What I'm going to tell you is happening, though, and we're going to look at this in 2 months, okay, is he's losing the CEOs. For those outside the United States, if you travel to Minneapolis and Minnesota, we probably have 70 of the Fortune 500 companies that are up there, including United Health, Target, Best Buy, an industrial technology company called 3M, all based up in Minnesota. Every one of their corporate leaders has signed a letter this morning and sent it to the president, urging for peace and focused cooperation and real solutions. So what they're basically saying, yes, your stagecraft is not working in our blue state. You're murdering people. And we would like you to stop the murdering of our Minnesota citizens and your fellow U.S. citizens. Okay. So now, Katty, we've got a group of people, and you know the typical group. It's Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski. These are the people that always say, we're going to look into the matter and you get our thoughts and prayers. These are the Frady Cat Republicans. Now, Senator Murkowski was in Davos, and she was decrying she was part of the delegation, actually, that went to Denmark with Senator Coons.
Who we spoke to on the show last week.
Yeah, we spoke to Senator Coons, but I saw her give a speech at USA House last week decrying the potential assault on Greenland. But these people will do absolutely nothing. And I'm going to quote her, ICE agents do not have carte blanche in carrying out their duties. Now, J.D. Vance said that they did. He's walked that back. But now, this is a huge opening, Katty. If you're a Democrat and you're organized, this is a huge opening. This is actually a blowback. And this is actually could be a victory for them in the culture war, but they won't. They won't do it because they don't understand how to do it.
We're going to talk about the Democrats more in the second half, but I want to talk a little bit more about the response, because I think what you said, Anthony, about these CEOs from these big companies, and our listeners around the world may not know that Minneapolis does have these very big companies. I think that's key. One of the most interesting things I heard from a European head of state last week was that the main reason Donald Trump backed down on Greenland was because the heads of the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven tech companies, went to him and said, this is not going to work. This is going to hurt everybody. This is going to cause an economic catastrophe. It's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt the global economy. It's going to hurt the American economy. And that was one of the triggers for him backing down. So I think your point about these CEOs, don't underestimate the power of markets, as we saw last week over Greenland. But even in this situation, if CEOs who have been super reluctant to criticize the president or anything the president does, start feeling that they have to say something about Minneapolis, because otherwise they're going to be out of step with the American public. I mean, 63% of Americans disapprove of what ICE is doing here. Then I think that's playing into Donald Trump climbing down. Don't you think? I mean, I think there are lots of things playing in here. But my sense is Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Corey Lewandowski, Kash Patel maybe, although it was interesting, Kash Patel was really pushed on Fox News by Maria Bartiromo, correspondent that you know, a host that you know. He was really pushed and he kind of deflected and said, oh, basically that's Homeland Security, it's not my fault. But I think they're out of step with where the president is. And I think the president is realizing they think they're winning the culture wars on this, but they're not winning the culture wars on this. Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma, was right. Americans don't like what they're seeing right now. Anthony, you said all along during the election campaign, Americans won't tolerate them doing mass deportations. And actually, they've tolerated a lot of mass deportations of people who were not criminals. We know that. A lot of the people who've been deported, more than half, are not criminals, not violent criminals. criminal, if you say that they're in the country or whatever, like that 5-year-old boy who was arrested.
They've deported some U.S. citizens too, Katty. I mean, they're out of their minds. They're out of control. It's like the monkeys got a hold of the zoo, and they're now going to do whatever they want. And the Democrats, unfortunately, and we will talk about in the second half, they don't get it. And that's where we are. But I want to just go to Trump because I'm going to make some predictions here. He's going to double down on law and order and immigration enforcement. Mm-hmm. He's going to definitely do that because that's his red meat. That's his base. He's going to support the federal agents. And if you're not supporting the cops, you're supporting the criminals. He's going to say that. Okay. He's then going to continue to blame the Democrats and local officials. He's going to say that they're inciting an insurrection and that they're all in cahoots with each other. See, that's what the Kristi Noem stuff was. If you listen to her interviews carefully, protesters are in cahoots with the hard left. And we're going to expose all that. We're going to weed it all out, okay? But he's also shifting here where he's got to find somebody to blame. So she's in the crosshairs. So Kristi, in my opinion, Secretary Noem, okay, she's now at the head of the departure sweepstakes. She's ahead of Hegseth and others because he can put Holman in that position, no problem, okay?
Yeah. She was in a pretty vulnerable position before this, wasn't she?
She was. And now the real question is, who's going to push Trump? Is there anybody in Washington that's going to hold Trump and these people accountable? Okay, and I predict that they won't do that. Some reason we've lost our ability to check and balance the government, which is why you have this jackass, Stephen Miller, who couldn't get confirmed dog catcher in the United States running things. And that's where we're going with this. And it sucks because they're hurting people.
Yeah. If this carries on, this is going to get way worse.
Now, I'm going to tell you other cities, right? If they try that bullshit in New York, there are actually libertarian New Yorkers, okay, that will side with the left. And it will say, get your jackboot, nasty mask face out of my face, and we're going to have a huge commotion, Katty. So they're doing it in Minnesota, a little different culture up in the Midwest. If they try that in some of the more aggressive blue state cities and some of the quote-unquote liberal cities, okay, you're going to have a complete and total unwinding nightmare on your hands.
Yeah, if they carry on doing this, I think Portland, Maine could be one of those. Maine is a very interesting state. Everyone thinks Maine is very democratic, but it's got a strong libertarian, purple culture to it. It's got a lot of rural areas that are pretty MAGA. It's a very strong gun-carrying state. And I thought one of the more interesting reactions has been from the gun advocacy community. There was a kind of great thing on X from a guy called Clint Russell, who's a MAGA podcaster who's got, not massive, 250,000 followers, but even so, he's very hard MAGA and opposed to illegal immigration. But they've pushed back on this. He's quoting Kash Patel, who at the weekend said you can't bring a firearm loaded to any sort of protest. And Clint Russell is saying, yes, the fuck you can, and saying as if that's a quote from every founding father. So you've got a lot of pushback, and you'd get a lot more pushback from a state like Maine as well, I think, where they're now, their next target is. But let me pick up on what you said about Stephen Miller, because I think that's interesting. And remember, everybody, if you haven't heard it, we did a great little mini series on Stephen Miller, who he is, what his background is, and the influence he has in the White House. It is for founding members. You can sign up, or you know where to find us and become a founding member. But so what does this do to Stephen Miller's influence in the White House? Because when you and I recorded that mini-series back in November, December, he was riding high. He's known as Deputy Chief of Staff, but actually, of course, he's much more powerful than that. He really has won the trust of Donald Trump. Does this incident in Minneapolis and Stephen Miller calling Alex Pretti, an ICU nurse who works with veterans in the Veterans Administration, calling him an assassin with no facts coming before there's been an investigation, with none of the facts coming in, people paying huge amount of tribute to this guy. Does this diminish Stephen Miller's influence in the White House? And perhaps more importantly, does this incident cause Donald Trump to rethink these ICE activities across the country? Does he now decide, actually, we're going to pull back from what ICE is doing, terrorizing people around the country.
So I think the first answer is no. Stephen Miller's influence not diminished at all. If anything, it's getting stronger as Trump continues to get more demented. And then secondarily, they will pull back a little because they know how embarrassing this is now, and they'll adjust some of their procedures, but they're coming hard for these people, and they're going to continue to come hard for these people until there's a check on their power. So that's either there's an electoral defeat, there is some type of organized response that's successful in the court of public opinion, but they'll keep coming, Katty, because this is what they do. But I want to just say something about Stephen Miller for a second, okay? If you're not well liked in high school and you are a miserable human being that actually hates people, okay, you can take a butane lighter to the U.S. Constitution and burn it up. And what's interesting about Stephen Miller is Stephen Miller played the long game. He bought call options on January 6th, 2021, when Kevin McCarthy said, nah, we don't need to impeach Trump and throw him out of office because he's completely politically irrelevant now. Look at the havoc he wreaked. And Mitch McConnell said the same thing. Trump is finished. Stephen Miller bought call options on the 2024 electoral win of Donald Trump. Why did he do that? Because he sees Trump as an empty vessel, and he sees Trump as a way for him to get into the government and to do his nefarious pain infliction on other people under the guise of we're right and you're wrong. Okay, so instead of living in a society that I would like to live in, which is you've got your life, I've got my life. If your sexual orientation is different than mine, God bless you. Let's all live here in the United States and live free. We have an asshole like Stephen Miller that wants to be punitive to people that don't live or think like him. Okay, so Donald Trump is an absolute disgrace. There's no question about that he's allowing that to happen. But Stephen Miller, okay, is going to bring down Donald Trump, Katty. Okay, you watch over the next 2 years how bad this gets.
This is Stephen Miller's administration at the moment, not Donald Trump's administration when it comes to this issue in particular. And Stephen Miller will be the thing that causes Republican members of Congress in vulnerable districts or in districts with large Hispanic populations to make Republicans lose the midterm elections in the House. And that will be why, because this issue is turning. They think Stephen Miller still thinks this is a way to own the libs, but he's not reading America right now. You got, what is it? The Wall Street Journal is saying, you got normies in America turning against this. They don't like what they're seeing. They don't like American citizens being shot, and everybody has the video. And this will be on Stephen Miller. It'll be on Stephen Miller if there are more lives that are lost, and it'll be on Stephen Miller in part if the Republicans lose the midterm elections.
The whole purpose of that Second Amendment, Katty,
the
whole purpose of that Second Amendment is when your government turns on you, you are armed to take on your government. How about the irony of that?
Yeah. And as you heard the chief of police of Minneapolis say over the weekend, Alex Pretti was not doing anything illegal. He did not deserve a death sentence for being there filming these protests. So, Katty, let's talk about the Democrats for a second, because we have to understand what they would do. To me, I'm looking at this saying, okay, I finally got the Republicans. They've completely overstepped. They're now killing American citizens. Do the Democrats ever have a meeting together? Do they ever get together and say, hey, fellows, we got to beat these guys because they're destroying the fabric of American society. So rather than shitting on each other, why don't we get together and have a coordinated response? Do they ever do that, Katty? Well, I guess, their initial coordinated response is to say we can't fund anything more for Homeland Security, which is going to shut down the government. And you even have the Democrats who voted last time around the government, who perhaps are seen as the more centrist Democrats in the Senate, coming out and saying, okay, no, this is enough. We can't, we just cannot give the Homeland Security Department another penny. But the trouble is they quickly get into a debate among themselves about whether abolish ICE is the next defund the police, and how do they handle this, and how do they phrase it, and how tough should they be? And in a way, shutting down the government and not giving any more money to DHS is a little bit performative, because DHS got so much money anyway in the big, beautiful bill that DHS is pretty well funded. I mean, what are you thinking of in particular about how you think Democrats should be handling this?
Okay, so to me, I thought the best response so far, and it sort of looked somewhat coordinated if you looked at the two letters, were the two former presidents, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, basically condemned the shooting, said it was a wake-up call, said that there needs to be lawful accountability. You know, the fact that the ICE agents have not been named, that happens in repressive regimes, okay? It doesn't happen in non-repressive regimes. Even when the George Floyd killing took place, the police officers were named, okay? That's about accountability and civil libertarianism. But in this case, under the junta of Stephen Miller, they're not naming the people, okay? And so you've got a defuncted procedures. But to me, I think what the two presidents said is something that has to happen, okay? That you have to condemn the deadly use of force. You have to restate the principles of what's going on. You need lawful enforcement and protection of the civil liberties of these people.
I thought Bill Clinton saying, you know, we have to show that the nation still belongs to we the people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he was talking. If you read the bottom part of his letter, was about process. You know, you need due process, right? In order to be free, Katty, from a criminal procedure or civil procedure perspective, you have to have process. You can't have somebody who's in the militia, a soldier, come up to you, decide you got a gun on you, bam, bam, put 10 shots into you. There has to be a process.
And you have, by the way, police officers across the country saying exactly what you've just said, that this guy should not be dead. I mean, he didn't do anything that was about to hurt these police. Their lives were not in danger. He was down on the floor. If anything, he should have been arrested. My question on those letters: where was George W. Bush?
So I don't know where George W. Bush is. I think George W. Bush has decided that he's out. He's a private citizen.
Wouldn't that have been more powerful if he'd been part of that group?
I think it would have been. I think there's a lot of critics that are calling for George W. Bush and other Republican retired leaders to come and speak out against this. I think that they've decided that they're not going to do that. They don't want to face the wrath of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been successful at either intimidating them into silence.
I don't think George W. Bush cares about intimidation from Donald Trump. I don't think he's sitting there in Texas worried about the wrath of Donald Trump.
Maybe not. Maybe it's not intimidation. Maybe it's he's made a decision like some of these generals.
I think he has this idea that he's protecting the system. I mean, he's doing something which feels old school, which is showing deference and respect to a system which right now appears to be teetering on the brink.
Right. Well, but it's not a system anymore. This is a Stephen Miller junta that has taken over the American government. So it's not really a system anymore. And so if you don't speak out against that and try to correct it, I think there's going to be a big problem. But I want to address this with you and ask you a question, because while this is going on, okay, because I obviously have a job as a capital allocator, the dollar is melting while this is going on. While this is going on, capital allocators outside of the United States, particularly in Europe, are selling the dollar, selling U.S. treasuries, selling American companies as a response to Donald Trump's behavior and rhetoric on the world stage.
Do you think it's also in response to Minneapolis or not? I was going to ask you that, Anthony. Is it just Greenland? Because I've watched that too. Or do you think this plays into it?
I think it could be, but it started happening before Minneapolis. You know, if you're in people's faces telling them that Mike makes right, and I'm going to flex on you, and my military can knock you on your ass, people are looking around saying, okay, I've got to form unnatural alliances with others. I've got to be Mark Carney going to China. I've got to figure out my new security system. I've got to prepare for a potential military crossing the northern border into Canada. I mean, you'd be irresponsible for Carney not to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting here now. What am I going to do? In protest, I'm going to start selling the dollar. I'm going to start finding ways to barter with other countries away from the United States. So why am I bringing this up? Because the move is a blunt instrument move by the Democrats. We're going to shut down the government and we're going to stop the $75 billion of funding into DHS. But then you're not understanding the holistic thing that's going on for America, the fabric of America, America's role in the world, and how important the U.S. dollar is to the American economy. And so go shut down the government. You're gonna disrupt the market, and you're gonna really hurt the economy, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so you play Democratic strategist. What would you do if you were running that? Say the Democratic Party was a cohesive organization. What would you actually have the Democrats do, given the position that they're in?
Unfortunately, what I would like them to do, they will not do. Okay, but what I would like them to do is I'd like them to take Newt Gingrich's playbook from 1994. I'd like them to anoint one person. Okay, I don't know who the person is. Maybe it's Gavin, maybe it's Hakeem Jeffries, but you got to get one person, and you got to put together a program, and you got to put together a list of things that everybody's going to abide to. Centrist Democrats, hard left Democrats. This is the 10 things that we're going to abide to. This is a restatement of a contract with America, if you remember that from 32 years ago. And what I would do is I would say, this is what we're going to do when we get back in power. And this is what we need to do to check this president into his lame duck status over the next 2 years. And this is the platform. And what would be in the platform are basic things, not hard left woke things. Okay, this would be things I would want the Democrats to appeal to the 40% of the voters that are registered independents. And I would tell people, let's get ourselves back into power, and then we can talk about the policy minutia. But they won't do that, Katty, because they can't do that. They're not capable of it.
What would you have them do right now in response to Minneapolis and what's happening right at the moment? What would you have them do that they are not doing, or that they could be doing that they're not doing?
Well, again, I would want a coordinated media strategy. I would want everybody in the room going on the airwaves, going on social media, explaining exactly what's going on, demand investigations, get the DHS Inspector General, try to push for some congressional hearings, push for more accountability and guardrails. I would not, and I repeat, I would not delay the funding. I would not defund because it's connected, Katty. It's connected to the economy, and it's connected to what's going on. And you would have to be an imbecile to not look at the economic dashboard of what's going on in the United States. If you toss the dollar, okay, you don't have the ability to run a $40 trillion deficit as the United States. Okay, my buddy Rick Reeder, I've known him for 40 years. He is 45-50% chance prediction markets. He's now going to be the Fed chair. He's loved by everybody. He's probably one of the most brilliant fixed income people in the United States. And I have seen his 200-page PowerPoint presentation on how to strengthen the dollar and keep the dollar as the hegemonic currency for the next century. And I'm sure he gave the Cliff Notes version of that to Donald Trump, which is why he's been placed in the pole position. Okay. But right now, I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, I can't have an unwind of the U.S. dollar at this moment. Ray Dalio in Davos with us is talking about a debt super cycle where the United States is borrowing money, Katty, to pay the interest on the money that they borrowed. Okay, I know we're talking about Minnesota and we're talking about the shootings, but I just need to explain to viewers and listeners how connected everything is. And you can't sit there in isolation and say, well, I'm going to protest this and this is how I'm going to do it, because you're going to move things around that you don't want to move.
Practically speaking, there was a lot of money already allocated to DHS in the Big Beautiful Bill, as we said earlier, and they're going to get that money anyway, whatever the Democrats do in terms of shutting down the government. I don't know if the big sell-off of America Inc. was in response just to Greenland and the international erraticism, or if Minneapolis is part of that. But certainly America's appeal for international investors and for anybody who wanted to have alliances with the United States was that there was a rule of law, that you didn't go to a protest in a way that was legal and get shot dead. That is part of the contract that the world has with the United States. And I think it's that contract that's being broken, both from an investment point of view and from a reputational point of view.
We've talked about this before, and I think it's important to continue to bring it up. And Lisa Cook, the irony is the Federal Reserve governor who I met with back in October, has written about this. When you have repressive regimes and you are bullying your citizens, you depress economic innovation, you depress entrepreneurship in your country.
Yes.
And so that is going on at a time where we don't need that to be going on. We have a pivot point in America where we could restate the vision of America and create an American renewal off of productivity, AI, robotics, immunotherapy. We could help our educational systems with the use of AI and improve the educational format, create more aspiration in America. But we have a bunch of monkeys running the zoo that want to put a hurt on their fellow citizens. They want to send us into a spiral. So you have two roads and you're at the fork. You can go hard repressive, lose the mantle of leadership of the US dollar, crush your citizens, I guess, to have some enjoyment for somebody who is a sadist like Stephen Miller, to enjoy the pain of that and to call people who are, not shooting at anybody assassins. I guess we could do that and America can live in that direction.
Stephen Miller, who ditched his middle school friend because he found out he had Hispanic roots.
Yeah, this sort of stuff. Okay. Or we can say, okay, we've got to heal America. To me, I would have, this is a platform of healing America. I'm AOC. I'm Gavin Newsom. We're all signed up for it. And here are the steps we're going to take. We're going to heal America. We understood. We got the message from the 24 election about the border. We want to have a reasonable, sensible border. We're going to try to seek better innovation in immigration reform. And we're going to try to repair our relationships with our allies so that we can strengthen the U.S. economy and strengthen the U.S. cultural image abroad like we were so successful for doing over the last 8 decades. Okay, not transgender in schools or transgender in sports, or transgender bathrooms. We're not doing that. All we're going to do is restate the vision of America as an inclusive society. Okay, and if they do that, Katty, they'll win the independence.
Yeah, right now they have a lot that they can run on.
Please, I'm begging you guys, do not close the government. We're already in enough trouble. Just take a look at where the yen is trading relative to the US dollar. Okay, we're in a lot of trouble, guys. Okay, and we're the soft power of the United States is eroding due to the idiocy of Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. Don't put us over the edge.
If you want to understand more about Minnesota and how this all started, particularly with the Somali community there, because that is the reason that Donald Trump says that he has gone into Minneapolis so heavily to target the Somali community. I had a conversation with Somalia's Deputy Prime Minister, Salah Ahmed Jama. It's a super insightful conversation. It's a very interesting look at how a small country, which is being hammered by President Trump, his people are being called low IQ people. They're being all slammed as terrorists. If you would like to see how a country like that has to deal with Donald Trump and how they have to respond to Donald Trump, you can get that conversation by becoming a founding member. Sign up at therestispoliticsus.com. I think it's a timely conversation because it looks at America from the outside and the challenges for a country like Somalia of having to deal with Donald Trump as he says these things about the people of your country. That interview will come out on Wednesday for our founding members. Thanks, guys, for listening. It's pretty grim. It's been a tough couple of weeks, but this one is particularly hard, and particularly hard, of course, for the people of Minneapolis. So our thoughts go out to them, and let's hope this violence ends soon. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.